For the holiday season, I thought it'd be appropriate to do a nice rendering of an ugly shoe, sort of my ugly shoe rendering version of the ugly sweater. Enjoy my ugly shoe rendering.
My name is Eric Strebel. I'm an industrial designer. Welcome to my channel about product design and making. I hope that you like, enjoy, and become a subscriber.
Make sure you give the video a thumbs up, and then you hit the bell. Hit the bell again, so you get the little parentheses around it. That way you'll be notified every time I have a new video. Don't forget to check out the design and making merch just below the video on the shelf. T-shirts, hoodies, stickers, leggings, and phone cases. So for this rendering, we're going to start out with a simple line drawing that I traced from an existing product. It's a rendering video, so I'm not going to spend my time designing the shoe. I did make some minor modifications just to simplify things. But the first thing I'm going to start with is the ground plane shadow. So we're assuming that the light is kind of coming down more or less from the top, maybe a little bit from the right-hand side. And I place in all my shadows first. So I know that underneath the shoe is going to be the darkest. And then the little opening where your foot actually goes in is also going to be pretty dark here. And I'm not going to talk too much about the markers that I'm using. I'm going to post that on the screen below so you can always see which marker value that I'm using. I'm going to talk a little bit more about strategy for rendering this out and my selection of colors, etc., and how I lay down the stuff and where I use that. So I didn't have a ton of colors with me. This is a demo that I did for my students at Wayne State where I teach. And the main color here I choose to start with was like a buff, and I immediately don't like that. And I try out some of the other colors. So this orange here that I'm using is probably a start with a mineral orange, and then work up the value from there. And here I lay down the mineral orange in the main panel of the shoe. That's the main color that I'm using, and that's the lightest of the orange colors that I have. So right after that, I'm going to come in here with a burnt ochre, and I'm going to lay that down basically as the shoe wraps. So it's going to get a little bit less light from the light source, and it's going to become a little bit darker. So the thing to remember here is to work quickly, and I want to make sure that I always have what I call like a wet edge or a wet surface, particularly when I'm trying to bleed one color into the other when I'm using markers. This is a difficult thing to do, so you want to work quickly and come with that second color right away on top of that initial marker color so that the two can kind of bleed. And you'll see, since this is a time lapse or a speed up in real time, you can actually kind of see the colors sort of fade from one into the other. And this can only be done if you work quickly right on top of the color you just laid down with a darker color to get that fade. It's a kind of a important technique thing, and it's something that you'll have to work on and kind of practice so that you can get that nice color gradation using markers without having to come back and use like some pastels to blend things in. Because working with the colors or the colored markers here, the Prismacolors, it's just a lot easier to just stay with markers instead of having to switch back and forth when you're doing a manual rendering like this. So at this point I have a choice to make. What color am I going to make the tongue? And I ultimately choose orange color here for the tongue. And, I got to apologize for the color selection. Again, it's an ugly shoe, so it's a nice rendering of an ugly shoe. Certainly not my style. I would never wear it. I see it more of as like a bowling shoe, super tacky. It might be for some people. I certainly see my share of ugly shoes out there. I'm pretty stunned at some of the shoes that I see that are released from Nike and Adidas, the Dayglow colors, and it's horrific. But I'm kind of a traditionalist, so I like my stuff a little bit more muted. So this shoe may appeal to some people, but it's not something I would ever buy, or probably even suggest in sort of a color combination. But it's the colors that I had on hand. So I carefully lay in the values for the tongue, and I leave all the laces white, and I'm adding in just a tiny little bit of value here in the sole to show a little bit of form. Again, the light's coming from the top down. I'm just using some gray, and you don't need a lot to show a little bit of form here in the sole to add some form. Now I'm going to come back and add a little bit of value into the laces as they kind of curve over. And so on the bottom of the laces, they get a little bit of gray just to show the lace has a little bit of form. And then on the back side as well here of that panel where the laces tie in here, I'm coming back in with a little bit of blue. And then I feel the laces need a little bit more pop, so I come back in with some more gray to add a little bit of value there. So now that my shoe is all done and kind of colored in, we're going to start adding some of the details. I'm going to use a gel pen here, and this is a 0.25 gel pen, so pretty fine. So the detail work on the inside of the pen, on the inside of the shoe is done with a pretty fine pen. I'm going to build up the values or increase the thickness of the pens as we go along, depending upon the detail that we're coloring in. So all this stuff on the inside of the shoe gets pretty fine value, and I'm using that 0.25 gel pen. All the stitching and everything is done with this 0.25 because I feel like that is not really the focus of the shoe, is really just a detail that I want to show off. So now we are going to step up to a 0.3 gel pen, and some of these other panels, like here in the toe and then around where the laces are, they are going to get outlined with something a little bit darker, this 0.3 here. And I'll eventually increase that to a little bit more. So when I have overlapping surfaces, or I'm showing surfaces moving around something, I will do that with the gel pen here to show that things have some depth. And I think that's an important little detail to show where one panel ends and meets into the other, to sort of show that little wraparound with a little darker line to show some depth. All these little panels, they all get outlined, so they get a little bit of punch. You can see where the edges of them are. And then we'll come back a little bit later with a little bit of white Prismacolor to show some highlights on some of these areas. But for right now, most everything is getting outlined with this gel pen at the 0.3. And this is where the laces are going to start to pop, as they are going to get outlined as well. This is where the rendering changes from this value study, or this value rendering, into more of a line drawing to make things kind of punch. When you're doing industrial design sketching, you're really not going for that photorealism. We are just trying to quickly, or as efficiently and fast as possible, showcase our product with the least amount of work, so we can go back to solving whatever problems that we need, or doing another sketch to illustrate or show another solution or another view to our product. And I come back here with some more gray to add a little bit more depth onto those laces so that they pop on the page. And we're going to go in with a walnut here and add a little bit of depth in the tongue area, where that's a little bit in shadow being cast by that top panel. So again, adding a little bit more depth where there might be a little bit of a cast shadow area right down here. So that, in conjunction with the black line, really starts to make the sketch kind of sing and pop, and then have some depth where one panel is laying on top of the other. We want to show that in the sketch. It shows that you understand the construction of a product, in this case a shoe, how one panel is laid on top of the other, or glued or sewn, or both, and to shows you understand the construction of the object. So here we're going to go one step up to an even thicker gel pen, the 0.4, and this is mainly outlining the product so that it pops off the page. And then some of the panels, that where particularly one panel is on top of another, to give it some additional depth, almost like the black line is a little cast shadow that's being cast from the light, and we're using that black line to sort of help emphasize and reinforce that idea. At this point, most of the line work and value has been done on the sketch, but I want to punch it up a little bit more. I'm going to use a thicker gel pen, in this case a Uniball Micro. I don't know the exact size of the ball on this thing, but it is definitely heavier than the other gel pens that I've been using. So when I really want to get a black and I really want to dial that in and add some punch, I'll go with a heavier gel pen. Next, we're going to come back in with a little bit of white Prismacolor, and this is sort of where the light is hitting directly on top of the shoe to add some more form. You can also use this technique if you need to blend two colors. Let's say your blend isn't really good. You can use the white to sort of smooth over the blend of the two to help with the transition from one color to the next. I sign my name, and at this point, the traditional sort of hand sketch is done, and we're going to take it into the computer. It's scanned in at 300 dpi, and the first thing I'm going to do is sort of crop it to today's sort of format, like a 16:9 aspect ratio, which is what I like to work in. And next, we're going to color balance it. I use the levels tool, and that allows me to add some contrast to the image, as well as clean up and make the whites white and get the punch in the sketch that I really want. Either I want to punch it up more than it was before, or I want to just get it to the way that I want. Next, most of the digital work that I'm doing here is just cleaning up the marker bleed in the places that are really bad and kind of driving me crazy, where I didn't pay attention or I wasn't careful enough. In this case here, I'm doing most of the work with the brush tool, and in this case, just coming in with a standard blue. But I will come back in with the clone tool here, and I will clone that color correct. So any black lines that overlap or are a little messy, color bleed, that's all getting fixed here in digital. I'm really not doing a lot of rendering. I'm not going to change anything because I really like the texture of the paper and the marker, and I want to keep that sort of old school feel, but I just want to clean it up. That's sort of the beauty of the digital for me, is I like to be able to just come back and fix some of those little mistakes, stuff that you couldn't do in the past. Now, of course, the beauty of digital here is that you can zoom in and out super close on those details. That's something that you can't do in real life. It does allow you to fix a lot of things, and that's what I'm mainly using the digital tool for. I'm using a Cintiq here, a 16-inch. It's a brand new tool for me. I've had a Cintiq for a long time. I had an older 24 UX, and recently upgraded to this 16-inch unit, and has a touch screen on it. Allows me to zoom in and out with my fingers, and I'm just sort of getting used to it. So I fumble around on some of these tools here. You see me pop into the menus here and there as I'm sort of learning the new shortcuts that I have set up with the hotkey remote. That is a separate tool, and it was, I really liked it before, the simplicity of it. I almost feel like there's too many controls on the new Cintiq. When they stripped away the ones that were built in, you've got to buy this hotkey remote, and there are just so many buttons and so many options on this new thing that it makes it difficult, I find, just programming the keys and getting to remember where everything is. But the tool is amazing. I do use it a lot, and probably couldn't do my normal workflow without my Cintiq, because I certainly don't have the coordination to draw on a tablet and look at a screen. I really need to draw right on top of whatever it is that I'm working on. So as a bit of advice, if you can afford it, buy a Cintiq. It's well worth the money. I see a lot of kids sketching on iPads, but it just doesn't have the same fidelity that something like a Cintiq has, or the control. And I feel the software on the iPads is not quite up to snuff, but it's getting there. And someday we'll probably all be drawing on iPads. But for right now, Cintiq's the king. Hope you enjoyed this very nice rendering of an ugly shoe. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can do that by clicking on the icon in the bottom right of the video or below the video. Give it a thumbs up and follow the channel there as well. If you want to know about upcoming design content and projects that I'm working on, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and my favorite Google+. Links below. Rock on. Click here to check out some of the other design and making videos that I have that you might enjoy.